Good morning, and welcome to the AstraZeneca First Quarter Results 2021 Media Conference. All participants are in a listen-only mode. Following the presentations, there will be a Q&A session. If you're participating on Zoom via your laptop or mobile device, please use the Raise a Hand feature to indicate you wish to ask a question. If listening on the telephone, please press star 1 to signal you wish to participate in the Q&A session. For those listening via the webcast on AstraZeneca.com, you will find a text box on the screen for you to enter your questions. Please remember to unmute your line when invited to speak. I must advise you that this conference is being recorded today. I would now like to hand the conference over to Chief Executive Officer at AstraZeneca, Pascal Soriot.
Hello everyone, this is Pascal Soriot, CEO of AstraZeneca. Welcome to our Q1 2021 media conference call. We would like to spend about 45 minutes today to take you through a short presentation and importantly to answer your questions. We will first focus on our Q1 results and provide a short update on our COVID-19 vaccine. For those joining us online, to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function as you just heard. If you're on the phone, please press star 1, or you can type a question via the webcast on AstraZeneca.com. Please turn to slide 2. Today I'm joined by Marc Dunoyer, our EVP and Chief of Finance and Chief Financial Officer, Mene Pangalos, who is the EVP of Biopharmaceuticals R&D, Ruud Dobber, who is the EVP of Biopharmaceutical Business Unit, Dave Fredrickson, the EVP of the Oncology Business Unit, and we also have Susan Galbraith, who was able to join us today, who is the SVP in charge of Research and Early Development Oncology. So if we turn to the next slide, this is our safe harbor statement. We'll be making comments today on our performance using constant exchange rates, or CER, core financial numbers, and other non-GAAP measures. A reconciliation between non-GAAP and GAAP data is contained in the results announcement. All numbers are in US dollars and for Q1 2021, unless we state otherwise. Please turn to slide 4. This is the second forward-looking legal disclaimer relating to our proposed acquisition of Alexion. So now let's turn to slide 5. AstraZeneca showed continued strong growth in Q1, as you can see from this slide, with a total revenue increase of 11% to $7.3 billion. Excluding revenues for the vaccine, which is the figure we use for guidance, revenue grew by 7% at CER, or to just over $7 billion. Today we are reconfirming our guidance for the full year, as this strong revenue growth drives our profitability and our cash generation. Looking ahead, there is every sign that our company will continue on this path of strong growth, with R&D investment up 18% to more than $1.6 billion in Q1 as we continue to develop one of the most exciting and promising pipelines in the industry. In recent days, we received a green light from the US for the acquisition of Alexion, the US FTC, and the acquisition of Alexion remains on track for completion in Q3. This acquisition will allow us to marry Alexion's pioneering science in complement technology with AstraZeneca's capabilities in genomics, precision, and oligonucleotides. Alexion brings great expertise in rare diseases, which will benefit from our strong global footprint. All further signs of the strength of AstraZeneca future. Looking at our product sales in the quarter, which is the total revenue figure, revenue, and for the quarter, those two numbers are very similar. We saw strong growth of 7% to $7.3 billion. And this was driven primarily by new medicines, including Tagrisso and Farxiga. By region, both product sales and total revenue grew 10% in emerging markets. In the US, they were also up 10%. In the established rest of the world market, a 5% increase. We saw an even more significant gain in Europe for both product sales and revenue to 18%, making Europe the fastest growing region for the whole company. It is really worth noting that the 17% revenue growth this quarter comes on top of the very high quarter a year ago, where we experienced a 17% revenue growth. As we signaled at the time last year, this was in part due to the one-off COVID-19 stocking as the pandemic began to take hold and patients and wholesalers were ordering medicines, in particular Symbicort in our case, to make sure they were well stocked with their medicine. As explained a year ago, the stocking effect provided a low to mid-single-digit percentage revenue boost back then. We had the effect of the pandemic, but also we had the effect of the launch of the authorized generic of Symbicort in the US. So two one-off stock build in Q1 last year, which makes the comparison to Q1 2020 very tough. Excluding these one-off items, Q1 2021 would have been another double-digit quarter. So overall, Q1 again showed strong growth, further strengthening our profitability and our cash position. It has also provided very encouraging signs for the future, given the strength of our underlying business, our industry-leading commitment to invest in R&D, and the planned acquisition of Alexion. So we can now turn to slide 6. Together with a strong increase in revenue and product sales, there are some other important elements of the financial performance I would like to take a closer look at. As mentioned in the previous slide, we continue to invest strongly in our pipeline, with core R&D investment now representing 22% of our total revenue. This increase reflected the advancement of several phase 3 programs from across the oncology, but also the biopharmaceuticals portfolio, as well as developing medicines to treat COVID-19. We also continue to recognize opportunities for deals to augment the pipeline. Following Calquence securing EU market authorization in November 2020, we completed our acquisition of Acerta this month by exercising our option to acquire the remaining 45% of the Acerta shares. The amortized cost of the option liability at the end of Q1 was $2.3 billion, with payments due in each of the next 3 years. We also completed the disposal of our investment in Viela Bio. The proceeds are a one-off non-taxable gain, which has reduced our core tax rate to 8%, whereas typically our core tax rate would be around 20%. As a result, this contributed to shareholders benefiting from a 53% increase in earnings per share that took the results, the EPS, to $1.63 for the quarter. In all, the company is generating significant increase in top line as well as in profits and cash position for the future. So if we turn to slide 7 now, you can see here that the guidance for 2021 is reconfirmed. And as a reminder, it excludes vaccine sales, but also excludes the potential benefits from the Alexion acquisition. We are still on this total revenue growth of low teen for the year and a core EPS of 4.75 to 5. We have to say we have in the first quarter or the first half we expect continued headwinds from COVID, like many other companies have announced in the last few days. But we expect a stronger second half of the year as the effect of COVID diminishes. So if we turn to slide 8. You can see here that if we look at the drivers of growth, the oncology business grew by 16% to a bit more than $3 billion. Product sales for Tagrisso grew by 13% to more than $1.1 billion for the quarter. Imfinzi grew by 17% to $556 million. And Lynparza grew by 33% to $543 million. If we look at respiratory and immunology, we declined by 4%. Fasenra, however, continued to make great strides with an increase of 27% in the quarter. But we see the impact of COVID-19 on Pulmicort and Symbicort. This is creating a headwind for those two products on a global basis. Overall, as I said, the revenue for respiratory and immunology declined by 4% to $1.5 billion. New CVRM, however, which is our new cardiovascular, renal, and metabolism medicines portfolio, so 15% growth to $1.3 billion. which was driven by the acceleration of sales of Farxiga. Farxiga grew by 50% in Q1 alone. Overall, we're making great progress thanks to the diversified nature of our therapy areas, which together continue to propel the company's growth despite the effect of the pandemic, which, as I said, we expect to diminish in the second half. Please turn to slide 9. This is a look at our pipeline, which quarter to quarter continues to deliver very strong results, and we continue to bring life-changing medicines to patients. If we look at what we achieved this quarter in oncology with Tagrisso, we saw a rapid regulatory and reimbursement set of decisions worldwide for the adjuvant treatment in patients with early-stage non-small cell lung cancer based on the results of the phase 3 ADAURA trial. If you look at Lynparza, the Olympia phase 3 trial demonstrated early efficacy in certain forms of breast cancer and continue to show why this is the leading PARP inhibitor class globally. In the second half of the year, we expect further data, including a prostate cancer readout and regulatory submission. If I turn to biopharmaceuticals, with Farxiga, we had a very important approval of the kidney disease indication in the U.S. following the priority review that we received some time ago. Also, later this year, we look forward to results from the Farxiga DELIVER phase 3 trial in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. And in RNI respiratory immunology, this week we announced groundbreaking high-level results for nirsevimab in respiratory syncytial virus, a virus which affects nearly all children before the age of 2. We believe nirsevimab could provide a significant public health benefit as the third RSV immunization for the general infant population. If we turn to slide 10, I'll say a few words about our COVID vaccine. Really, it's important to remember what has been achieved in the last few months. We're very, very proud that within a few months, we've produced a vaccine for the world offering protection to some of our most vulnerable communities. To date, we have supplied more than 300 million doses to 165 countries. It is really a remarkable achievement considering it's a year today that we entered into our agreement with Oxford. Importantly, 90% of vaccination in India are done with our vaccine, and we all know the catastrophic pandemic that is raging through India at this stage. It's really awful. We are very proud of being able to help people in India delivering very, very large quantities of vaccination, and as I said, representing up to 90% of all the vaccinations that are conducted in India. We also are providing 98% of supply to COVAX. Continue to progress with the filing, which will take place in the next few weeks. In all, our vaccine continues to play a leading role in the global fight against the pandemic and is having a measurable impact on the lives of millions of people. It is really saving lives. It's stopping people from getting ill and going to hospital. And we are seeing signs that it is reducing transmission. We saw recent data in the UK. In Europe, we continue to make progress with the supply, and at the end of April, we will have supplied about 50 million doses, and we continue to work hard to increase the output. So if we turn to the next slide, please. So if I now wrap up the presentation with a short summary of the quarter. In Q1, despite widespread disruption of the world economy and importantly to our industry, as you've, I'm sure, noticed over the last few days of announcements, our company continued to deliver significant growth despite a very tough comparison to a strong Q1 that was helped by inventory builds. Total revenue, excluding the vaccine, increased 11% to $7.3 billion at actual rate, and by 7% to $7 billion at CER for the quarter, if we don't include the contribution for the vaccine. The highlights for the quarter were really very much products you've heard before. Lynparza up 33%, doing extremely well. Farxiga up 50%, Fasenra up 27%. So all our critical core products, strategic products continue to grow very strongly. From a regional viewpoint, the US, the emerging markets are growing very nicely, but in particular Europe grew by double digits. So you can see a widespread growth across our portfolio of products, but also across our geographies. And it's very nice to see Europe grow nicely after many years of having to manage decline from patent expiries. We saw continued COVID-19 related effects on sales of Pulmicort and Symbicort in every country around the world, but in particular in China. And that, of course, put pressure on our respiratory revenue globally. Thanks to this balanced growth across the product portfolio in the regions, we are reconfirming our guidance for the year in terms of top-line growth, but also profitability. And we can see a continued improvement in cash generation, as we had indicated we were aiming to achieve. And when we look to the future, there's still every sign that our company will continue on this path of strong growth over the next number of years. We have a strong investment in R&D. We continue to invest heavily in our very rich pipeline, and we invested $1.6 billion in R&D in Q1 alone. The FTC in the US has given us the green light for the acquisition of Alexion, and of course now we need to obtain the same green light in other geographies, but we are on track for completion in the third quarter. And that would be another therapy area for the company and another engine of growth. As mentioned earlier, vaccine deliveries across the globe are continuing at pace, with shipments increasing as manufacturing output improves. And we are proud to say that our vaccine accounts for almost all COVAX shipments to date to more than 100 low-income countries. So overall, Q1 again showed solid growth, and I'm confident that this growth will accelerate over the course of the year, in particular in the second half of the year, and that will enable us to achieve our goals for the year. So before we move to the Q&A, I wanted to say a few words about my dear friend and colleague José Baselga, who led our oncology R&D team so brilliantly, but sadly passed away suddenly just over a month ago. He was an outstanding scientist, a true giant in his field. He was recognized for pioneering research and for his involvement in developing so many medicines for cancer patients, in particular in breast cancer. The team continued to build on his transformational work and his vision across our oncology R&D. He made a tremendous impact on our organization over the last 2 years, and we all owe him a great deal for his brilliance. And you know, we will miss him as a scientist, but also as a wonderful colleague and friend. Thank you for your attention, and we'll now open the Q&A. Again, remember, raise your hand, use this function on Zoom, but also if you're on the phone, press *1, or you can type a question via the webcast on AstraZeneca.com. Sorry. Perhaps we can now take the first question.
We have Ludwig Berger from Reuters.
Yes, go ahead, Ludwig. I cannot see actually the hands raised, actually, Gonzalo. So if you don't mind, I'll rely on you to announce who is asking a question. For some reason, I cannot see. Go ahead, Ludwig. We can't hear you. At least I cannot hear you. You might be on mute.
Why don't we go to Hannah Kutcher from the FT, and we'll come back to Ludwig later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So on the COVID vaccine, I'd like to know what the problem is with the data that you are submitting to the FDA for approval, why it's taking so long, and if there's any chance that you actually won't submit to the FDA, given the US doesn't seem to need the vaccine.
Yes, maybe Mene, you can take this question. I know there's nothing wrong with the data. It's just that the size of the submission that we have to make has nothing to do with previous submissions because we don't have a single study. We have an enormous submission to make. But Mene, go ahead with that. You're on mute, Mene.
Okay, Pascal. Yeah, so you just answered it. I think the key is that we're not just submitting the US data. We're submitting all of the trials from Europe. We're also having to do all the pooled analyses, pharmacovigilance from all of the studies that have been run and all of the utilization of the vaccine. So there's a lot more data than just the phase 3 study, and so we're working as fast as we can to pull it all together and submit. But it's understandably taking long because it's much bigger than any file that we would normally submit.
If we had only one study, the so-called US/global study, it would be much more straightforward. But here we have the Oxford program to submit. We have all our real-world evidence. We have various studies around the world to submit, pharmacovigilance data, as Mene said. So a pretty substantial filing. So nothing really problematic here, just the size of the work. So the next question is Jenny Strasberg at the Wall Street Journal. Jenny, go ahead.
Thank you. Question about the EPS effect from the vaccine. I wondered if you could just bottom line that. Back of the envelope, is that about $40 million in the quarter? And just can you explain a little bit about how, I know you said the performance around the vaccine and its effect on the bottom line will, I think, equalize or stabilize in the second quarter, or in the second half, I'm sorry. But can you kind of talk about when you think you might break even, and is it a function of just explain what you're putting forward and what you're not getting back at this point? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. That gives me a chance to clarify because I may not have been clear. When we talk about COVID, there are two dimensions to this. One is the effect of COVID on our general business, if you will. I'm sure you've heard many other pharma companies in the last few days announce that COVID-19, the pandemic itself, had an impact on cancer diagnosis, on treatment of patients, and it affects all our products. So when I talked about the second half, I was talking about the effect of the pandemic itself on our general portfolio of products that, as I said, we've done well in the first quarter, but we still have a negative impact of the pandemic on our business, just like every other pharmaceutical company. So that's one aspect. And the second aspect is the vaccine itself. I'll ask Mark to comment on this, but we will have variations from quarter to quarter, small variations. Bottom line is we want to be doing it at no loss, no profit, but they have variations. Mark, if you want to answer more specifically the question.
Yes. So, yes, we can expect, and we have mentioned that in our no profit commitment, we expect to have small variations quarter to quarter, but these variations will equalize around the break-even for the totality of the cycle. The cycle is not only the cycle of delivery, but also monitoring of the safety of the vaccine over several years. So over all this cycle, the profit, the plus and minus around the break-even will equalize, and therefore there will be small variations quarter to quarter.
And can you just kind of translate the 3-cent EPS to a bottom line number, please, just so I know.
Well, we're not presenting a sort of a profit and loss for the vaccine itself, but we have indicated that it has a negative impact for the first quarter of 2021 of 3 cents. Mm-hmm. So you can look at 3 cents impact on the reported EPS that we are providing.
Okay, and just on the production, are you planning to? I know you said last quarter you would hit 200 million doses by this month. Are you on track for that?
We are on track with this actually, Jenny, and it's important to keep in mind and remember that when we talk about 200 million, we are talking about the global supply chain output. And what I call the global supply chain output is the output of the AZ supply chain, but also our partners around the world, Serum Institute in India, but also other partners like Fiocruz in Brazil and others. But absolutely, we're on track with this.
Thank you.
And you know, in India in particular, Serum Institute is producing a very large quantity, and it's all used for vaccinations in India, which is why I was saying earlier, more than 90% of vaccinations in India are done with our vaccine. So clearly in India, this vaccine is having a tremendous impact on helping people. But as you know, there are lots of many people in India, so several hundred millions of people at risk that are, older or with risk factors. So it's going to take a little while until they can vaccinate all these people who are at risk.
Okay, thank you. I'll not ask 5 questions, even though I want to. Thanks.
So next question. Well, how about we go back to Ludwig now again? If Ludwig, you are able to speak now. No, Ludwig Berger at Reuters. Still have a technical issue. So the next question is Susie Ring at Bloomberg. Susie, go ahead, and we'll go back to Ludwig a little later.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the second part of Hannah's question that I don't think we got an answer on in terms of the emergency window, obviously given the pace of the rollout of vaccines in the US. Have you been given any reassurance or pause for caution over meeting the kind of emergency threshold to get an EUA rather than just going for a full market approval? And also you mentioned in your results that you're looking for data readout and regulatory submission of your antibody treatment. I wondered, is that going to be led by the US submission? And one final one, if I can, obviously businesses are all looking at new ways of working post-pandemic. Has Astra formalized anything around flexible working for the future?
So several questions, Susie. So maybe Mene, you could start with the lab.
Well, I'll do the first two. So that, and also the EUA again. Obviously, we're working with BARDA and the US government and the FDA right now. The assumption is that we'll be filing for the EUA. But if ultimately they say to us that they'd rather we file for a BLA, then we will do that. But right now, the assumption is we'll be filing for the EUA, as I said, in the coming weeks. With regards to the lab, the data readout, as I said, is in the first half of the year, and the EUA submissions will be led in the US, but then we'll also be doing global submissions around the world as well for the lab.
Thanks, Mene. And the last question, Susie, is the answer is we haven't concluded yet because, as you can imagine, we want to develop a policy together with our friends at Alexion so that we don't have to redevelop something after the merger. So we're going to be doing this together with our Alexion colleagues and implement the new policy after we have all approvals for the merger. But it's clear that there will be some element of flexibility in the policy in the future. But it's also clear that we all believe in the need to come together on a regular basis if you want to innovate and if you want to maintain the social capital of the company and the culture of the company. People need to meet, but there'll be some element of flexibility in our policy. We need to adapt to the new world and what we've learned from COVID for sure. The next question is from Alex Kraft at the Times. Alex, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Just a few questions. The first, obviously, you've been heavily criticised, including from senior US regulators on the nature of disclosed and communicated information. I just felt whether you could have improved that, whether you agreed with those criticisms, and more broadly, whether you're concerned that would have any wider reputational impact on the business. There's been suggestions that given the level of criticism that you guys wouldn't do this on a non-profit basis, should it, in hindsight, I wondered if that was indeed the case. You've also been criticised for being in Australia during the lockdown. I wondered if you'd returned to Europe now and whether you felt that was also a just criticism, and whether that had reduced your oversight over the company. And lastly, just whether you felt that what sort of assessment you've made of the commercial opportunity for the vaccine after the pandemic.
Yeah, so several questions, Alex. Let me give it a try, and maybe Mene could add. We actually got involved because we wanted to help, and we thought we could make a difference and develop this vaccine and not commercialize it, but distribute it, I should say, at no profit. And we never pretended that we were going to be perfect, and suddenly we've learned a few things along the way. But you have to realize that what we've done has been done within a year. We didn't start in January or February last year like some other companies did. We started in May, June when we got involved with our colleagues at Oxford. So for us, the timeline has been very, very short. At the end of the day, we can look at this with a glass half empty look, or we can look at the glass half full. And if you look at the glass half full, what we have achieved is 300 million doses of vaccine as of today. We have not the only, but the major vaccine helping people in India. Imagine without a vaccine what India would look like. Imagine we had not stepped up. Imagine we have said no. And imagine nobody would have helped this vaccine. Think about it. A year ago, everybody was talking about 120 vaccines in development, 130 vaccines. It was, we forget very quickly, but that's what people were talking about last year. Where are all those vaccines? They're nowhere. Why? Some of them have failed, like it happens in our industry, but in many cases, simply because there was no manufacturing capacity to manufacture them. So, without a vaccine, there would be no vaccine in India. There would be no supply to COVAX, and et cetera, et cetera. So, including in Europe, even though we are unfortunately not delivering the quantity of vaccine we were hoping to deliver, we are still the second largest supplier of vaccine to the European community. 50 million doses at the end of April, and we only started 1st of February. And we are the second largest supplier to the EU. So at the end of the day, all of these things can be looked at, different ways. But we don't regret anything because, first of all, we look forward, not backwards, and we have made an enormous difference. A lot of people are very thankful for the difference we've made. Would I prefer to have had make an even bigger difference? Of course. Would I prefer to have delivered more quantities to Europe, for instance? Of course. But at the end of the day, we did our very best to help the world, including every region of the world. And I think overall, the team should be very proud of the difference we've made and the lives we've saved. If you look at the UK, and I'm sure the same is true of every other country where we deliver the vaccine, but we have data in the UK. Public Health England published recently an analysis that the vaccination had saved at the time 10,500 lives. And our vaccine is a great portion of the vaccinations in the UK that have been made with the Pfizer vaccine and our vaccine. And it's the same in many, many countries around the world. So, I think we are very proud, but of course we are disappointed we didn't do even more. We would have loved to do even more. And as to the remote work, my life has always been, over the last number of years, sort of 80% spent on video because I manage the global network. My team is based in Sweden, Cambridge, the US, in Wilmington, in Gettysburg, in China, in Shanghai. So we've got a team of people that are based around the world. In Switzerland, near Zurich. So every meeting I'm in, there's someone on the video. So for me, it hasn't been much of a change. And as a company, we've learned to work remotely even more so. And in fact, a lot of companies have really embraced remote digital working a lot more than a lot like we did, which, by the way, helps us reduce our carbon footprint. So certainly working digitally is something we'll do even more in the future. So the next question, maybe we could go back to Ludwig. Ludwig at Reuters, if you're back again, Ludwig, should we try?
I think we have his colleague, Alistair Smout, instead. I don't know if Alistair...
Okay. Go ahead, Alistair.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, thank you. You're obviously in court at the moment with the European Union, and they've sort of, one of the criticisms they've leveled is that you perhaps overpromised how quickly you could and efficiently you could supply vaccine doses. We've heard a very impassioned defense just now, but it is the case that Denmark, Australia, Israel are perhaps saying now they don't need AstraZeneca's vaccine, and maybe some of the excess demand for your vaccine with the supply constraints you've had, maybe that's starting to even out. So first of all, do you think you overpromised in terms of the commitments you signed up for? And secondly, now that some places are saying, actually, we don't need AstraZeneca, are you recalibrating your supplies, and how will that impact your projections for how much vaccine you can supply to, say, Britain or the European Union or indeed India? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Alistair. I don't think we ever overpromised. We never promised more than we thought we could deliver. And again, with hindsight, everybody is very wise. But basically, what we communicated at the time as a forecast was based on the capacity that we had put together, and based on assumptions which at the time, to be honest, were even conservative. The assumption in terms of yield and productivity in the bioreactors was even less than our friends at Oxford University had communicated to us. We took a set of assumptions we thought were conservative. It turned out that as far as the EU supply chains, two of the major sites didn't deliver. And if you look at the network of sites around the world, some have done very well and delivered the yield that we expected and more, but others have not. So, that has been valuable around the world, and we've said that many times before, but we never overpromised. We actually communicated what we thought we could achieve at the time. And beyond this, it's hard for me to comment more, because as you know, when you're in a court case, you basically do not comment. The only thing I would say here is we really welcome this possibility to resolve the discussion on the supply, and we are totally committed to increasing the supply to Europe. And in fact, everywhere, countries have told us they still want the totality of what they've ordered. And in fact, everybody wants it even faster. Even in places where we are delivering according to schedule, countries would like us to deliver even faster. So we, everywhere around the world, are doing our very best to increase production and deliveries. Next question is Knut at the Swedish Public Television. Knut Rognerud, I hope I'm not harming your name too badly. Knut, go ahead.
Maybe you're on mute.
If there is another question, was Knut is...
I think we have Julia also from The Guardian, Julia Kaliva.
Yeah, Julia, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Just following on from what you've been saying that about India, it would take a little while to vaccinate the vulnerable population there. What's your best guess? How long is that going to take, and when can the Serum Institute start exporting vaccines again around the world? And on that, you said 48 million vaccine doses were shipped under the COVAX initiative in the first quarter. Can you comment on how this compares to the schedule? COVAX has reported delays with these deliveries. Can you say how severe those delays are and what you can do to speed up deliveries, please?
Yes, Julia, thank you. The first part of the question I cannot answer because, as you can imagine, the government of India basically has to decide what they want to do. This pandemic in India has really exploded, as we all know, and it's suddenly something that caught many people by surprise. So the need for a vaccine in India, or the vaccine produced by Serum Institute, has exploded, and it's yet not clear when it will be possible to export again. And so the link, we hope at some point the exports reopen, but it's really not in our hands at all. The second part of your question is linked to the first part, really, is that the supply to COVAX is lower than expected because our colleagues, our partners at Serum Institute have not been able to export the quantities that they were hoping to export or planning to export, and therefore the supply to COVAX is short versus what we were expecting. But of course, at the end of the day, if you manufacture 1 million doses of a vaccine, you can't multiply it. You have to decide where it's going to be shipped, and in that instance, the Indian government has decided it should prioritize its own population. And quite frankly, we've seen this in many other countries around the world, and when you see the state of the pandemic in India, you understand why the authorities would want to prioritize this. So of course it creates issues elsewhere in the world, but at the end of the day, we do our very, very best to produce as much as we can, and our friends at Serum, but we are not, we can only manufacture what the bioreactors that we have will produce, and that's the limitation we have, whether it's in India or anywhere else. We can't tell the cells in the bioreactors to produce more. That's the limiting factor we have. Also to understand is the cycle to make a vaccine is a very long one. And so any improvement in yield that would happen today will turn into increased quantities of finished vaccine 3 to 4 months later. So that's the limitation. The bottom line is people in the world say they don't need our vaccine, but overall the world needs this vaccine. And we have many countries that want more of it.
Thank you.
How about we go back to Knut if he has been able to connect? How about we move to Etienne Lavelle at S&P Global?
Hi, thanks for taking my questions, Pascal. Just first on R&D spend after the Alexion integration, can you give us an idea of the percentage that you will spend revenues? And then a couple of questions. Lynparza, the European performance higher than the US. Can you just tell us a little bit about this? What's happening with BRCA testing? You say it's increasing in the EU. What's happening in the United States? Has it been stalled by the pandemic along with general diagnoses in oncology? And then a final one, if I may, Tagrisso in China. You say the RDL listing. What level can we expect this to bounce back to in future quarters? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Etienne. The vaccine is important, but it's very nice to also talk about our core products. They do very well. We have a great portfolio of products. So Dave, can you cover the Tagrisso questions, and maybe Mark could cover the R&D spend question?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just start on the Tagrisso question. So within China, just as a reminder, we had NRDL inclusion come into effect beginning March 1st. And that's a little different than in years past, where it comes into effect on January 1. Within that context, we saw emerging market sales for China really deliver some very nice demand growth in the quarter. It was offset by stock compensation also that we realized in the quarter, because there was stock compensation into January and February. But I think that the key point that I'd like to comment on is that the Tagrisso business in China really is, from the underlying fundamentals, performing quite nicely. And I expect that we will see the volume growth from expanded access offsetting the impact of price reductions that we needed to take on in order to come onto the NRDL. And the math for that makes pretty good sense, because there's over twice as many frontline patients than there were second-line patients. On Lynparza, just to clarify, is the question specifically about BRCA testing within the United States in the context of, was it in breast cancer?
It's just about genetic testing full stop, and also obviously the impact of delayed diagnosis you've talked about, but presumably this has a knock-on effect on genetic testing too.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, I think just again to review on these pieces, we're seeing across tumor types that the level of diagnoses are down 70 to 80% relative to the pre-COVID baseline. We're seeing a greater level of lower diagnoses with lung cancer. It's a little bit higher, interestingly enough, with breast cancer, and then ovarian and chronic lymphocytic leukemia sits somewhere in between. Indeed, testing is also something that has been affected by it. I would say that I'm happy to report, though, within that context, we have seen in the United States that our efforts to drive HRD testing for ovarian cancer and HRRM testing for prostate cancer have both grown in terms of the utilization of those tests. Unfortunately, it's just the number of patients coming into the office that has really presented the greatest challenge. I also think that the silver lining in this is that we've seen a lot more pivot towards technologies of remote testing. Interestingly, I'd actually say that we've seen at-home and remote testing take even kind of greater hold outside of the United States. We've seen Latin America, Europe, indeed in parts of Asia, home testing for EGFR be something that has been picked up and taking place. So I do think that we've had an opportunity to pivot to some new ways of working that will be beneficial in the future.
Thank you, Dave. Mark, comments on the...
Yes. So short comment on the vaccine, the R&D, sorry. The spend on first quarter 21 was equivalent to 23% of our total revenue. If you look comparable in 2020, it was 22%, so a slight increase. We need to be aware that in the quarter 21, there are spend that are related to the vaccine, COVID-19, as well as for the long-acting antibody. Moving forward, we have said many times that we will work hard on having a positive operating leverage, which means we will spend our operational expenses will grow less rapidly than our total revenues, and we intend to continue this in the future after the integration of Alexion. But we have also said many times that we will continue investing in R&D at the top end of the innovative industry. So that provides, I think, a good dimension of our R&D spend for years to come, because we want to retain a sustainable growth, a very rapid sustainable growth in years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So maybe we'll conclude here. Just want to conclude by repeating again that, even though indeed there are supply shortfalls in some geographies overall, it's important to remember what has been achieved with these vaccines. 300 million doses of vaccines delivered so far to date means 300 million people protected. And we know from real-life studies and also our clinical program that the vaccine is very effective. So that's a fantastic achievement that we're all very proud of. And maybe the second message I'd like to leave you with is, as you saw, our core products continue to do very well. We are on track. We had a good Q1 despite a tough comparison to Q1 2020. And also despite headwinds from COVID, like the entire industry is facing. And we are on track with delivering our goals for the year. So with this, thank you so much for your interest in our company, and I wish you a good rest of the day.